On this webinar, we're talking about the legal and HR perspective on furlough workers. So we've covered the topic of furlough workers as part of our weekly Tuesday webinars, but this is a chance to have a deeper dive into the topic. So Stuart, over to you.
Right, well, welcome everybody. So the coronavirus job retention scheme is starting to become much clearer in terms of the steps forward, but there's still areas of clarification which are coming out, not quite daily now, but certainly as we're moving forward. So today we've got Joe Rogers with us. Hi, Joe.
Hi, thanks, Stuart.
Joe's our legal, and Sue's our HR specialist. So we just wanted to bring us the legal and the HR aspects to bear, because of course most of your team members will have contracts, and we need to make sure we don't slip on any banana skins or do the wrong thing or even do the right thing but in the wrong way. So Sue will give us a good steer on that. So Joe, just bringing you in on this, what should our clients and be thinking about in terms of the contractual aspects of this scheme and this position?
So I think there's a few phases. I feel like we're still in the furlough phase of making some decisions. It's been, what, 4 weeks since the economy has changed, let's just say, and the situation has kicked off. And so many of us, and I count myself as a small business in this respect, are still in the furlough stages. We're still saying, okay, what do we need to do if that wasn't our immediate reaction? Many of the clients that we've been working with, we've been suggesting, a little bit like the redundancy process, gathering together the team, and if they haven't already done this, they're in the process of doing this, gathering together the team, talking about options, letting people know what furlough is. So providing, I saw some of the documentation that you guys had provided from a accountancy perspective, Stuart. So providing documentation to the staff and saying, hey, look, this is what we are going to have to do. Things are going to be changing. I think for me, that level of transparency, we've worked with a lot of clients, are very transparent with their team members. Mm-hmm. And then being able to explain that maybe some, not all, will be furloughed, and notifying them of changes. Because of course, furlough isn't the only option here with employees. Furlough is one option of many. There is also redundancy if it's needed. Doesn't seem appropriate when you've got the furlough option. But there's also kind of changing of terms and reducing salary or reducing hours. But all of those require consent. And I make that as a very broad statement, because the reality is it will depend on the contract. So I would say get the contracts out. Get all of your team employment contracts out. This is a great thing to do right at the beginning. Get the team contracts out. Get clear. In theory, most of them should be the same, but I suspect what you'll find is due to housekeeping issues, they're not all the same. And I would go through and highlight in those documents where there are, where it mentions changes to be made to the contract. As a general overview, you're looking at getting consent from your team, which in theory, in these circumstances, shouldn't be that difficult. But we have seen, we've always been suggesting, give them notice, allow them to feedback, and then kind of make your decisions off the back of that, because it will also stand you in good stead in the event that, and this is kind of phase 2, furlough is not enough for those for that period of time, and that actually redundancies do need to be made. I guess that's an overview of where things are at the moment.
I think that's key, isn't it? So I think the first place to go is, what does the contract say? Because some contracts have clauses that give you the right to vary, in which case, if you do have the correct clauses, then you can, without their consent, notify them of those changes. Some contracts are silent on this, in which case, if they are silent, then you've got to get, then it's very advisable to get consent. Although I did read, Joe, that the government's talking about bringing law in to protect employers in this situation.
I saw that as well, but one of the things that I would just say on anything, there is the legal way of doing it, and then there is the relationship way of doing it. And I kind of know everybody on this call is going to be very much in favor of this. Isn't about battering anybody. These are really, I hear people say unprecedented times. Emotionally, it is difficult for everybody. Yeah. And nobody wants to reduce their salary, but everybody will be understanding. And so I don't think this is going to be one of those environments where we just say, like it or lump it, here you go, this is what you've got to do. I mean, you must have seen on social media those kind of lists of, bad boys, like Richard Branson's on there, and people that are treating their employees not in a way that we would expect them to be treated. So I'm all for your legal rights, and as business owners, we want to be able to do the best we can for the business, because if the business isn't there to run, nobody's got a job. But also in these environments, just talking them through, at least kind of explaining them well, over communicating with employees, really, really key, I think, at this point in time.
Yeah, so Sue, on the soft side of things, it's a great opportunity for you to come in there with the HR and how to approach these discussions.
Thank you. I would really echo what Jo said. I think that communication and over communication is absolutely key. People want to be kept informed. And I think the other key things that she mentioned, it's about kind of demonstrating transparency and demonstrating fairness in terms of the decision making, because nothing will annoy employees more than if they don't understand why they've been treated in one way and their colleague who normally would sit next to them is treated in a very different way. And so by being open and transparent and as honest as you can be, I think that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just, sorry to Stuart, just to add to that point, Sue, thanks, because it also to treat people fairly and non-discriminatory is a legal obligation. And so documenting everything that we're doing, not just for furlough, but for redundancy going forward, because I'm not saying that because we furlough people, we're going to make people redundant, but the reality here is, as businesses, we're now looking at a possible downturn in the economy that is beyond this lockdown. And therefore, we are going to have to make restructure changes. There are going to be considerations above and beyond just can we keep somebody on for the next 3 months. Whereas somebody working at Pret a Manger is saying, well, actually, we're going to be up, we'll probably need back at least 8 of those 10 people. There are other businesses that are going to need to slowly ramp back up after this situation. And so there may be redundancies kind of in the future. And it is important that we start thinking about those now for the end of June.
And I would echo that, because that restructuring piece is really valuable to be thinking about that now. So whilst you've got maybe the opportunities presented by this time to think about what is the ideal structure that you really ideally needs, because structures have a way of kind of morphing and changing, and this is a good opportunity to do quite a piece on reviewing what you ideally want and what you ideally need going forward.
Rose, are there any questions that are coming up that
We've got some questions specific about the furlough process, so that people are actually trying to deal with it now. So we had Adrian, an independent consultant, ask, can he actually furlough himself if he owns a limited company? Jo, do you want to cover that one?
The short answer is yes, you can. However, you cannot do any work for the company if you furlough yourself. And that makes it, other than key elements of filing a company's house, etc. So things that have to be done for the business. I think that makes it difficult to furlough yourself, because things like social media, etc., will be considered to be business related. I think you have to make the decision about what you're able to do. But yes, effectively, you are self-employed, and therefore you are able to furlough yourself.
And Sue, I know we had a conversation around furlough and what people are and aren't allowed to do during that time. And this topic of training has come up again and again. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been doing a bit more research on this one, and some of the most recent research training is okay, actually, during furlough. Now, that's based on what we know now, and as you all know, it's a kind of constantly changing picture. But it looks like you will have an opportunity to undertake training whilst furloughed.
Okay, excellent. And we had some specific questions around how companies actually get these funds for the furloughed workers from HMRC. Who wants to cover that?
Yeah, so basically the HMRC have said in the update briefings that, the government said in the update briefings, and HMRC are being tasked to achieve this. The 20th of April, they're aiming to have their portal open. And we have had contact from HMRC notifying us that obviously we will be, along with many others, encouraged to be agents to input applications and claims in for the CGRS. And
Jo and Sue, did you have anything to add there around how companies need to be preparing to make these claims, any kind of legal or HR perspectives on that?
Nothing from me, I don't think. I'll be very impressed if HMRC gets this done by the 20th of April, because it's been a very short period of time. And I think for me, most clients that I work with will be dealing with a professional to kind of manage that process, because I don't think it's possible to, well, maybe it is possible, but you know, accountants like Acuity, you'll basically go to your guys to just say, hey, look, we've got these 50 people, 20 people, one person who are going to furlough, can you support us? Because I think they'll have economies of scale, they'll know exactly what to do. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. And one more question from the pre-submitted, and then we've got quite a lot of questions coming in. So around HR here, holiday. This has come up in the news and in conversations. Are people entitled to holiday during furlough? And are they entitled to take it when they go back after furlough? And what's the risk there of everybody taking holiday at the same time when they go back? Sue.
Yeah, I'll pick this up. I mean, it is sort of, we are getting constant clarification. At the moment, employees can take holiday during furlough. However, they'd need to be paid at a full-time rate for that. So they can apply for holiday and take holiday during that period. Now, the biggest issue is what happens if people decide not to take anything. A couple of things. Can I force them to take some holiday during this period? And secondly, what happens when we do get back to work and then they've got all this holiday that they're accruing whilst off that they might be wanting to take? So at the moment, it looks like the government are going to be pushing through the ability for certain people to carry holiday over. And that's something that people might want to think about offering staff. You also might want to think about whether you've got within your contract of employment, or indeed your employee handbook, the opportunity to ask people to take holiday at particular times. So for instance, a lot of places you might say, well, we're shut over Christmas, take your holiday then. So if you have got that ability, then you'll be able to suggest potentially that they take some holiday during the furlough time. But it's back to what Jo said at the very beginning. It's about kind of mutual consent. It's about, can you afford to pay them at a full-time rate? It's about a weighing up of the kind of benefits and the costs of doing that. But then when you come back, I think it's about planning reasonably with people how they could take holiday and how you can get the business up and running. So it's back to the point at the beginning. It's all about a kind of open, honest communication about what you need in the business and what individuals might want as well.
Okay, Sue, we've just had a question coming in on what you were speaking about there from Cassie Rain, who's saying, can you give advice on how to communicate with employees during furlough? She's saying, should we speak to them once a week as a company director? What's the sort of both the human and also the legal perspective on communicating with employees?
I think it sort of comes down to how do you normally talk to them, and you know, what you want to put in place as good practice over this period. I mean, I think that people welcome the opportunity to connect just like we're connecting now. So it could be that you set up a regular sort of Friday update. Now that could be via email. You could decide to do it in a slightly different way. You could record a message, you know, whatever suits your business. But I think to keep people in the loop and keep communicating with them seems to me like a really good idea at this time. But what you don't want to be is kind of, you know, putting pressure on them through that communication. So you've got to make sure that it's an appropriate communication. It's how are they, bit of an update on where things are. You know, potentially as we get more from the government, it could be an update on, you know, what to do about holidays. It could be those kind of things that you communicate.
Mm-hmm. Stuart, do you have anything to share on that as a business owner communicating with your employees?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just echo exactly what Sue said. I think keeping it simple and very clear, being very transparent on your position. Obviously, everybody is in the same boat. I think there is a general goodwill despite the difficult conversations and certainly unplanned, unintentional conversations. But I think keeping it simple, I would, if you can drop someone a line, I'll do so because it just takes some stress out, because people sometimes wonder, did they say this? Did they say that? What is the position? We all have a lot of, concerns and doubts as to what was said. So I think anything you can put in writing just to give some assurance on where you are and the next steps and what you're going to do, and let them know there's a next step. We'll brief you again here. Just helps people manage that perturbation they're experiencing.
And Joe, did you want to share anything on that topic? It's quite an important one.
Well, I mean, for us, we've ended up having kind of daily calls. I mean, that's just my experience. And that's not really because I've got anything more to share with my team, but just because I want to know how they're doing, how they're checking, because I say emotionally, there is a lot that is being taken on board by team members, but that's appropriate for me and because of the size of our team. And the question is, who's making that communication? What is being said? And how can that best be recorded? I also it doesn't reflect on the communication, but I just wanted to remind us all, when we're looking at options, furlough is not the only option. I know I said this at the beginning, but it's not the only option. And there is actually, if we're projecting forward, if we're looking ahead to holiday entitlement and what this is going to look like, not just in 3 months' time, but in 6 months' time and maybe up to a year's time, it's definitely worth looking at and communicating with employees, not just about, hey, by the way, we're going to furlough you because it looks like this. It's like, what does that whole process look like? Because if you can incorporate, I'm a lawyer and that will always go back to the contract, but if you can go back to that contract and think, how do we manage this contract as an employee, employer to employee over the course of the next 6 to 12 months? And you can build in processes then that are not just about the next 3 months, and that to me gives more comfort to me if as an employee than just kind of saying, oh, okay, by the way, for the next 3 months, this is going to look like this. If you can almost future, obviously we're not everybody, you can't protect everybody, but you can certainly future project what roles may be around and kind of giving them some confidence and just letting them know, look, yeah, like Stuart said, this is the next part of the agenda. This is the next piece of the puzzle that we're going to be looking at.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for those insights. So we've got a few more questions or a bit more about the actual furlough process, but I think we can cover them off quite quickly. So we'll go through a few. So we've got one from Claire Hammond saying, so Stuart, I'll direct this one at you. For the HMRC process, do they apply for the 80% that they've already paid, or do they have to apply for that whole 3 month process, the whole 3 month period, sorry?
Well, the exact detail will become more clear once the portal's up on the process, so we'll be able to pick that up at that point. But ordinarily, it would be expected that when you process payroll, then you apply. So the minimum is 3 weeks. So if it's a monthly, you'd apply for the month. and then you'd apply again. And the government has said they'll do this for 3 months and maybe extend it. God willing, they won't need to extend it, because hopefully we'll be all getting back to work. But in the event they do, then it would sort of mirror a payroll. Well, we think at the moment it will mirror a payroll, which is why they're using HMRC. So they'll release the funds back to the business. So all the exact mechanics and plumbing, I'm sure they're furiously putting together at the moment, because as Joe said, this is, it is an unprecedented time, and putting these mechanisms together will be a major challenge, which I'm sure they're up to. And there certainly is the will, and they appreciate that the cash coming to the business, going to the staff, is absolutely crucial to retain staff, which of course is the underlying objective. So, if you've got workers and teammates who are in distress and you have the cash flow, then, use your judgment. You will be able to claim it back, 80%, up to 80% of the 2,500 cap. On top of that will be the pension and employers' national insurance, which gets added to that. Important to remember that it's not a gross fixed number, but the exact process and steps will become clear. But we imagine it's going to just follow like a typical payroll journey. So you won't be claiming for 3 months, because we don't know when it's going to end. The government said they'll do up to that and maybe extend.
Okay, and another nuts and bolts question. We've had this question come up quite a lot. Can people take another job whilst they are being furloughed? And what's the legal, this is specifically around legal, what's the legal impact, implications of that? So Joe, I'll put that one to you.
Sure, and I believe that the guidance on this has literally changed 360 degrees or 180 degrees even from the original. If I talk from the employee perspective, if you want to work for somebody else, having been furloughed by your company, you will need to go to the company to request or get consent to work elsewhere. There is no automatic right to work elsewhere. And I just want to, if we go back to kind of the reason for the legislation and the reason for the change to saying, yes, you can work elsewhere. That's the current indication, is you can work elsewhere, but as long as you are not forbidden from doing so by your employer. In order to get some sort of consent, again, going back to the contract. So as an employer, you will want to look at the contract to see whether your employees are able to work elsewhere. It makes a lot more sense in the kind of gig economy, or those individuals that are working at, coffee shops or working, I know, Tesco's and supermarkets are not really furloughing employees right now, but people that want to go from Pret-a-Manger or working at Costa to then saying, well, actually, I need to, stack supermarket shelves. And I think it's a sensible decision off the back of that. The answer is, again, it comes down to consent. And this is why I think the communication between employer and employee has to be so important, because you're asking, there's a level of trust, and you're saying, look, you're going to be staying at home. We don't really want you to be working, particularly from an employer perspective, don't really want you to work for anybody that's a competitor. We don't really want you working for anybody that's during your usual work hours. So as an employer, it will be down to you to decide. Either it may be in the contract already, as I'm saying, but it may be that you may need to make that decision about whether you will allow employees to work elsewhere. So the answer always comes down to check your contracts and work out whether it's consent. And my suggestion is go further than just to see whether they have or haven't got that contract. I would make that explicitly clear to people in the furloughing process. Like, we expect you not to be working with somebody else is a very clear instruction, and a fair one if they're working 9 to 5 and they shouldn't really be working elsewhere. So yeah.
And the last two questions we have at the moment are actually, again, I think quite specific. Stuart, you might have a comment here, though, around, are there templates available for people to furlough themselves? Anyone got access to templates that we could share with people on the call?
If you want to look at some standard letters, the ACAS website holds a very good source of good, sensible letters to send to employees, and I guess to send to yourself around furlough. So that's where I'd go as the first port of call.
Okay.
The FSB also has similar types of templates, and they have great standard form which you can adapt appropriately.
And I think, what we can do is, we are available to give you, brief, specific feedback. And if you do want us to get more involved with you on tailored advice and, bespoke documentation for you, just to have comfort that the correct things are going out, then, between us as a team, we have the skills and the insights to help you do that. And we're more than happy to coach you through that process.
Okay, well, we'll finish there then in terms of questions. Does anybody, Stuart, Joe, Sue, do you want to give any final remarks?
Yeah, I think just remember, obviously, this is a hard time for everybody, and we will come through this, and we're delighted that you've put in questions and that you've joined. I hope that you found today helpful. Sometimes, just gathering information or using the team as a sounding board could be helpful. But it is a good opportunity. I think let's look on the positive side of this. We're now looking at contracts, we're now looking at terms, we're looking at performance type stuff. This is a real opportunity to sort of reset your relationships and your terms and be very clear with the team, because we're all going to have clarity. Once we're heading towards business as usual, we're going to need to run quite quickly to catch up for the downtime. So it's going to become quite key to have all our housekeeping, hygiene, contractual stuff properly put together, and that could be a real opportunity to bring a sense of purpose and clarity to the team. So
I was just going to echo a lot of what Stuart said, but I think it's about kind of thinking about what we can do in this time to really set ourselves up for success going forward. It's that kind of press pause that maybe we've always said, oh, I wish I could stop things and just think about this. Well, now is the perfect opportunity to do that. And there's lots of support out there, and Stuart's just mentioned some of the topics that it might be useful to think about, and I would just really encourage people to kind of start that process of thinking about how to improve some of the ways that we do things, and see this in that kind of opportunity to do things better.
Excellent, thank you, Sue. And Joe,
yeah, I would just say keep going, guys, because for me, it's like kind of our size businesses, we're the lifeblood of this country, and I think it's great. The opportunity here is something we've not yet experienced, but I do think we've got to look at the numbers, cash flow project. That's Stuart. Look at the contracts, and I don't just mean the employment contracts. I think there's going to be something further. There's the next phase, which I guess I've been alluding to, of contracts, employment, and I just think keeping a positive mindset, which is what I get from the Acuity team. Really, it's like, let's we're all, I hate the phrase, but we're all in this together. I hate those slogans which I'm hearing on the media all the time, but sometimes they're true, and really this is about us all as small businesses, because I think everybody on this call is in a small to mid-sized business where we are one of the majority in this country, and we're all now stepping up. So yeah, I echo everything that's being said. Let's just keep going.
Thank you, Joe. That's great. And also, just to finish off, thank you for everyone who's put their answered the poll that we were asking you about the areas you'd like more information on. And it's interesting to see that the top area that people would like more information on at the moment is the effective return to work after furlough. So it's good to see people are looking to the future, what's coming, and hopefully with a positive mindset for the business, all the businesses on the call today.
Brilliant.
So thank you for joining today. We hope you found it useful. Tomorrow we have a session on estates planning, wills and trusts. So if that's relevant for you, then you'll receive the link to register in the follow-up notes after this call today. And then next Tuesday, every Tuesday at 12, we have the update on the government support measures. On our YouTube channel, you can see all of the previous recordings. So if you haven't attended one of those Tuesday sessions before, please look back at the recordings, because every Tuesday we only have the time within that 45 minutes to cover the new updates from that week, rather than everything, all the information out there. So check back at the previous recordings, join us on Tuesday or tomorrow, and do let us know any other topics you'd like covered in this webinar series. So thank you for joining, and we hope to see you soon.